Commissioner Boyd.
Present.
We have an agenda in front of us, and are there any questions, suggestions, changes of sorts, or can we approve it?
I'd like to move we adopt the agenda.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Everyone agrees. So we have the approval of the minutes. Any changes to anything that was in those minutes?
I didn't see minutes in the packet. I'm sure they're fine, but
I thought I did. I thought that you had sent them out.
let me look again.
I didn't see them either.
If I didn't attach them, I am happy to go print them quickly and pass them out.
Well, we have two people that haven't seen them.
Let me do it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, maybe we can delay that to after correspondence and public comment.
Any communications that we've received? Actually, with Christy gone, I'm not sure what I didn't receive any communications.
Yeah, there was one that came today from Pam Boyd.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, Pam being my wife, she mentioned that it bounced back, yours bounced back to her, and I'm not sure why that would happen, but.
Okay.
I didn't see that.
That came at just after 10 a.m.
Do you want me to go make a copy? I have a copy. I can make it just two for Jim and Monica.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I saw
I'm
it.
good. I've got electronic.
Well, I'll wait till Diane comes back, because if there's any public comment, I think we want to have everybody here to hear it. It's odd that it would have bounced back, 'cause I've got another commission correspondence, but technology isn't always perfect.
No, I don't find it.
Yeah, it's funny, Pam mentioned that she was sending this and she asked me about the email address for the compensation commission. I didn't realize there was an email address with a distribution list. I'd never actually checked, so that's learned something new today.
Okay, my apologies to everybody. I know I did them, but I can't find them on my hard drive right now. And instead of taking up time to do that, let's put them on the next meeting. If that's okay.
Well, I think it has to be. If we don't have them, we don't have them. I thought that you'd send them to me.
And I did do that, but I
have no objections. I have no objections.
Okay, thanks.
If you guys want to approve.
It's baffling me right now, so I don't understand it, but I'll figure it out.
Are people good with going forward with those minutes and reviewing them next week, or what would you like?
Yeah, let's review them next week.
Okay.
Since,
Yep, that's fine.
yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So we have this correspondence, Dear Compensation Commission.
Yeah, I don't have a copy.
I think it was 2 pages. Should I read this out loud so everybody hears it?
If you don't mind reading out loud.
Dear Compensation Commission, thank you all for being willing to be on this important commission. I'd like to take a minute to remind you that many other townships of our size and revenue have well-staffed departments who do most of the legwork for the trustees. Scio Township does not. This is not to talk bad about our current staff. I'm talking about planning staff, finance director, HR staff that we currently don't have. You could say that our trustees are essentially the cooks, wait staff, and cleanup crew of the local, AKA Scio Township Board. Some of our trustees spend hours each week investigating various complaints and issues. Some trustees have day jobs and don't have time for these events. If you compare Scio to Pittsfield, Superior, Ypsilanti, They have in-house planning departments that work in the best interest of their township. Trustees of these townships have in-house staff to do the hard work, investigations, one-on-one with residents. The trustees' main job is to read a packet, make decisions, and vote based on the information that's housed. In-house staff provided them. Trustees have questions, they can go to staff for those answers. Again, Scio Township lacks adequate staffing. Residents issues deep dives to understanding PUD, SAD, or other agenda items before the board many times require trustees to do their own research and study. A few examples of these issues have taken hours of research and investigation. Misty Farms Wedding Barn, 2014 Scio Church Road have had numerous complaints over the last 13 years. Scio trustees, Noel and Carrie in particular, have tried to help these residents with ongoing noise problems as little has been done to correct the problems. Again, Scio does not have the adequate staffing to resolve these problems in-house. Trailwood subdivision just found out some of the common areas in their backyards were going to be part of a new Stabler Parks roadbed. It seems that in the developer, WCRC, state of Michigan, potentially Scio Township knew of this, but the residents in the Trailwoods did not. This came to the attention of Trustee Carey, who spent hours doing a deep dive to help the residents find parts of the puzzle so a complete picture could be seen and understood to find out where the errors occurred and how to fix it. We had an in-house planner, it would have been put on their shoulders to help these residents. Number three, the various SAD issues that have plagued the township. Again, in one case, it was trustees Noel and other resident Carey, and then resident Carey who worked with residents regarding the 2021 Railroad neighborhood potential SAD that came close to giving Scio Township a black eye. I'd like to think that with in-house staff, these problems would never have happened in the first place. Our trustees are the go-to people for resident problems. Hiring staff to do this work is not currently a discussion topic for our board. Yes, they have been looking for a finance director, but we're closing in on 2 years now without that unicorn task. Please take into consideration when discussing trustee compensation, how much time trustees spend helping residents with issues. Their time often ends up being more involved as a resident issue unfold. Thank you, Pam Boyd, Scio resident, Scio Community Newsletter. Was there any other communication that was given? Okay, so we're moving into the public hearing, and we're going to have 3 positions tell us about, I won't say make a presentation, telling us about their responsibilities and how they execute in this role. And we have the supervisor first, however, we're actually going to
We're gonna do public comment. I'm not sure if someone wants to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I asked to move it up, it's
Yeah.
consistent.
Rewind. We will take public comment at this
Maybe I
time.
don't get any.
Kathleen has thrown me a curveball, and we're now having public comment.
I see one hand raised. Rob Pattinson, go ahead, please. I was gonna give anything.
I don't, never seen those.
I did see him, and I thought it was probably just
Yeah.
Using prior form.
Yeah, so we don't have any plans to do.
No.
Yeah.
They're not placeholders, just
It was the only way I knew how to put the agenda together, that's how you needed to do
Okay.
it, but there were no attachments that I was giving. When I was giving the agenda, it was just those items, and so I listed them just in that fashion.
thank you for asking. Any other hands up?
This time I see no other hands raised.
Okay, well, we'll close the public comment, move into the public hearing. And we're going to move on to having the supervisor tell us about his responsibilities and what he does. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to meet with us. We are looking at, we're allocating 15 minutes. And I think that a lot of people, when you're talking about what they do on a day-to-day basis, they're very involved with it. It can really be extensive. And so we're really going to try to keep that 15 minutes in terms of that time period. So again, I thank you. And let's hear it from our supervisor.
Well, I didn't really prepare a presentation. I thank you for inviting me to come and talk with you. I understood that the Compensation Commission might have some questions. I did provide a job description. I think you got that for an earlier meeting packet. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about that. The role of being a supervisor is an interesting job. I am learning all the time new things, and it's a really rewarding opportunity to serve for someone like me who likes to engage in public service. So I'm valuing the opportunity to do this work. I think it's a much more demanding job than I understood when I first put my name forward to run for office. I encourage people who are thinking about serving in local government to seize that opportunity, and whether it's in a role in the township government or some other capacity. Happy to, I guess I'm happy to answer questions from the Compensation Commission.
Does anybody have any questions in particular?
Actually, I do. Yeah, so I'm John Boyd.
I know.
And so obviously we're here looking at compensation, and I'm just wondering how much attention did you pay to the offered compensation as you're deciding to pursue this position?
Well,
the thoughts of the election and all the stuff involved.
I'm trying to think back. It would have been 2020. At that time, I think we just entered the pandemic when it was time to file to run in 2020. So it was kind of an odd time. I wasn't really focused on the compensation that much. Mostly I was focused on questions of Scio Township and how we were, our government was going to sort of carry forward some of the things that I and other people had been working on in other capacities, serving on different boards and commissions. And it was only later that I focused on it. At the time, I had been, in some ways, I'd been sort of assured that it was a part-time job. And so it was really only later, after I began transitioning into the role of being supervisor, that I started to think about it a little bit more, because I realized that it wasn't really a part-time job. It's a full-time job. And sometimes it's much more than just a 40-hour-a-week job. So I did start thinking about it more later after I took office. And actually, sort of leading up to being sworn in, the workload was already sort of shifting as we went into the transition. I started to get a better sense for what the job entailed or could entail. And then it was after that we started looking at compensation, and that was before we had a compensation commission. So it was during that time period that I started thinking about it more. Okay. And it wasn't just me, it was other members of the board who were also sort of noticing that there was a lot more than a part-time job there.
And then what, and I'm sorry, probably everybody else at the table knows this, but what had you been active in with the township prior to 2020? Well,
I started serving on a planning commission almost 10 years earlier. Okay. And then from there, I got involved in the Parks Advisory Board, the Transportation Alternative Committee. I served on Master Plan Implementation Committee, and there was something else too.
And so those were all like voluntary positions?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well, actually, there's a modest kind of per diem kind of payment to planning commission
Oh, that's right.
members.
Okay. We talked about that. Okay, thank you.
If you could tell us a little bit kind of about your, I realize I suspect that every day is a little different. But, you know, if you could just kind of give us an insight to your day-to-day involvement and responsibilities and things that take your time.
Well, a lot of it is communication via email. So I'll get up in the morning and I'll start looking at email usually before 7 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes I'll get sucked into writing or communicating by phone and spend hours on that before I even come into the office. I usually spend at least a few hours a day here at Township Hall. On some days, I can be here for 12 hours. And, you know, those are usually days when we have a meeting. Sometimes we have special meetings and so on. But a good chunk of time is spent just communicating, written communication via email, phone communication, conferring with different people. There's a lot of, I guess it sort of falls into different categories. There's sort of responding to issues that are brought to you as a supervisor, and a lot of stuff sort of flows to that office. Some of it is nudging things forward. And so it's kind of keeping track of all the different things that are going on and noticing when something is sort of lagging, whether it needs attention of one kind or another, and, you know, sort of trying to push that forward. Sometimes it's just a matter of sort of asking someone for a status report. Other times it's noticing that someone's waiting for somebody else and nudging that person to give whatever the person over here needs in order to move forward. A lot of it is kind of like herding cats, you know. Which is not to say that people aren't doing their jobs. It's just that, you know, everyone's busy and things tend to move forward when more attention is being paid to them. And some attention has more weight than others. And I think, you know, when the supervisor is paying attention, sometimes people take notice more than they would if it was just a call from a member of the staff or a resident complaining about something. A lot of time gets spent following up on things like complaints. I got a little bit of warning about this ahead of time, you know, oh, you're going to get some complaints about GFL service, for example. And I said, well, can't someone else handle that? And actually my predecessor said, no, it doesn't work if someone else is handling it. It has to be the supervisor drawing attention to the issue in order to really make things happen. And I learned that that's true. And it's been a big part of the job ever since I took office, because the single waste hauler was implemented. That contract went into effect in January. It was actually the prior board that signed that contract, I believe, in just before we took office in November of 2020. So it's been a part of the supervisor's job, is implementing that single waste hauler contract. Has been one of my things to do ever since.
I have some questions, Mr. Hathaway. Everything you just stated, except for GFL, you did not provide any specifics.
What kind of
specifics? Specifics related to your statutory duties. You said that you process emails, phone calls, spend a couple of hours a day in the office unless there's a board meeting, and complaints, but nothing specific to your statutory duties.
Well, which statutory duties are you interested in
I
particular?
would expect that you were familiar with those.
Well, okay. A big part of the
I can look them up, not a problem, and I will.
I hope you have the memo that.
I do, and I have a question on that.
Okay,
Mr. Homier?
which question shall I tackle first?
No, I just wanted you to give some specifics that you are personally responsible for.
Sure. One of the statutory responsibilities of the supervisor is as the moderator of Board of Trustees meetings. And in that capacity, there's a lot of work. It's pretty much, it goes in sort of a cycle. There's the cycle of preparing the agenda and the meeting materials and getting those produced and out, published for both the board members and for the public. And then there's the task of moderating the meeting itself. Both of those things are pretty demanding. I learned, and in some cases, our agendas are there's a lot of labor involved in putting them together, other times less so. But there's always a deadline to be met, and it's one of the tasks that I'm sort of conscious of all the time. And it's not just a matter of just sort of pulling papers together. Many times it's a matter of preparing an agenda item to make sure that it's ready, that it's complete. In some cases, it's a matter of sort of working on an agenda item to make sure that it's ready in the sense that it's something that the board can actually consider and act on. So there's evaluation that goes into, there's decisions, there's evaluation, there's work that goes into each agenda item to varying degrees. Sometimes evaluation leads to pulling things from the agenda. So it's a constantly sort of evolving, moving target. And then after the meeting, there's a follow-up. You have to sort of go through all of the different actions of the board, make sure that things are being followed up on and acted upon. And that that follow-up to the meeting can become the kinds of things that I was describing earlier, sort of nudging things along.
Okay, so this is a question I'm going to ask every officer that comes before us. Are you planning on running for supervisor in the next election cycle?
I'm not talking about that at this point, but thank you for asking.
Not a bad answer. Okay, I have another follow-on question.
And also too, we have about 4 minutes here.
Yeah, I've got a timer on it. That's why, I want to make sure I get these questions in.
Sure.
One of your statutory duties is to be secretary of the Board of Review, and you have never accomplished that duty. It's in your memo from Mr. Homier as duties. Do you plan on taking up that duty? It's mandated.
Well, I'm not sure. Mandating it's in the state. It's a statutory authority of supervisors of townships. In Scio Township's case, the supervisor has traditionally delegated that authority. I do play an active role working closely with the assessor in the assessing function. But in Scio Township's case, the Board of Review is overseen by the assessor, and we have another member of staff.
Statutory duties are that you are supposed to be the secretary, which means you would take notes on the hearings, and that format is directive. So that's a statutory duty. If you're not going to do that duty, then it should be reflected in salary, because we are paying township staff to do that duty if you choose not to.
Well, I don't want to get into a big debate about it, but there's a lot of.
Just a question, are you going to or not?
I'm answering or responding to your question. The statutory authorities that are in the law for different officers are often delegated to other people to help with. And in this case, this is one that Scio Township has traditionally, the supervisor has traditionally delegated that authority.
You have a resolution that delegated that authority? Because I've never seen one.
I haven't asked about it. I'm guessing that it's a practice that has been in place for such a long time that if there was ever a resolution for it,
Let's move on.
Yeah, I'll let anybody else speak. Thanks.
I just have a quick question. Thank you for coming.
Diane.
With the hiring of a new township manager, who I Hope has a long career here in Scio Township. Are there any of the duties that you gave us in your listing that will be going away to the township manager?
I actually, that's a good question. I updated that job description to try and incorporate some of the changes that have occurred. You may remember because you were around helping at the township at that time when we were doing these job descriptions. That job description for the supervisor used to include more things. But when I heard that the Compensation Commission would wanted job descriptions, I thought I should go over it.
So this is the new one?
Yeah, so the one that you have received should reflect changes that the board has made since then.
I would like to correct the record. He provided you a job description. On January the 10th, 2023, the board repealed that job description. So his duties are simply statutory, not simply, but they are outlined in statute. So that job description is not valid. It was repealed by the board.
Well, the job description that was approved by the board in August of 2021 was modified, I guess you could say, repealed in the sense that it was approved by the board.
It was repealed and
But
no
this-
further
But the
job
Compensation
description
Commission asked for a
was-
job description, and so I tried to provide you with what you were asking for, which is updated to reflect the changes from the
Yes,
board.
things that are not
I think we need to see
statutory.
the record.
We'll have to request the record and,
Yep.
but we've.
I have the resolution in front of me, but
So what we have in front of us is not a traditional classification description. It's more of, these are the tasks or responsibilities that you are currently.
Yeah, it's meant to include all the different things that I do. It's not meant to imply that the board has, sort of delegated necessarily these tasks or these responsibilities. Some of them are statutory, so they would be included, but many of them are just things that the supervisor does.
And the only person, you have supervisory responsibility for the assessor's office.
That is a statutory, well, that's another good example, right? So that's a statutory thing that's in the law. However, in Scio Township, we've tried to consolidate authority for supervision of staff under the township manager.
I think we've allotted the right amount of time here. And we've got two other people to.
Yeah, I don't want to take more time than you need or that I'm allotted.
Thank you for your insight.
Thank
Thank
you
you for your
much.
time. Thank you for your service.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your service. I appreciate you guys taking time to play this role for the township. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Jessica. Jessica? She's on.
Okay, hello.
Hey, Jessica,
Hello,
first of all,
Jessica.
thank you for zooming in and taking time out on a Friday.
Thank you for having me. And did my big face appear earlier when I logged in? I
You
apologize.
blipped on and I thought, there's Jess.
I am so sorry.
Don't worry about that. We want to thank you for everything that you do and for taking the time to talk with us today. As you know, we're talking to, your colleagues as well. And so we're allotting 15 minutes, we might go over here or there, but, just trying to be true to that time period because I think that I know with my own responsibilities, when people ask me about them, I could probably talk to them about it for days, but we've got about 15 minutes. So thank you for your time. Please tell us about your world as a clerk.
Thank you so much, Monica. Really appreciate it. And good to see you all. And again, thank you for the accommodation by Zoom. I really would have been there in person, but it's my dad's 80th birthday celebration, and we're here in Chicago with my 3 older sisters, so I couldn't miss it. So I prepared a little bit of an outline, and I thought that I could give kind of an overview, and please just interrupt me at any point with questions or if I'm off track at all. So I've been in this office since June 1st, 2019, when I was unanimously appointed by the board to fill the remainder of the term for Nancy Hedberg and first elected by voters in November of 2020. My work is primarily at Township Hall, off-site in the community as needed, but mostly at Township Hall, and some from home, many evenings and most weekends. I regularly work a solid 55 to 60 hours a week throughout the year, with the exception of a vacation. During election season, which is about a 6-week period, Mary and I consider election season. It's 7 days a week. When it's going smoothly, I have regular days. And then certainly there are the extraordinary days of the Monday and Tuesday of election day, which are usually about 18-hour days. But my regular weeks are 55 to 60, election time more. About the office of the township clerk and the duties as the Scio township clerk. My assessment is that the township clerk is the most complex and demanding township office in nearly any Michigan township, including in Scio. In very, very small townships where everybody works from home, the township clerk office is often the very first one to go full-time or the first one to become paid. The work of a township clerk, it's varied, it's complex, and having the job of the township clerk done properly helps to protect elections, our public funds, and public integrity. The position comes with a range of duties sprinkled throughout the statute that are established by the legislature, but they really fall into 3 primary areas: elections, financial accounting, and records. All of these areas are assigned to the clerk because they're independent from the board and separate from the supervisor/assessor and the treasurer/tax collector. The clerk must be free from undue interference so that our democracy can function properly. The clerk administers elections, is the custodian of nearly all township records, and is responsible for properly accounting for the township's monies. Without an accurate count of the votes cast, which ordinances have been enacted and in effect, or the accounting of the funds that properly belong to the township, our ability as a township to properly function would break. So while I do have some additional responsibilities assigned by ordinance, they all generally align within those 3 statutory areas of elections, finance, and records. And so with that, if I could, I'd like to provide an overview, Monica, first of elections, and then finance, and then records. Would that be okay?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Regarding the area of elections. So my responsibilities regarding elections are set forth in the Michigan Constitution, MCL 168 elections, and rules that are promulgated by the Michigan Secretary of State. The county clerks also are responsible for critical functions as well. But my responsibilities are not set forth by the county, but by the state and the Constitution. Michigan elections work extremely well compared with other states. And that's in part because we are so decentralized. Every single township or city clerk maintains their own voter rolls and administers the elections for each of our jurisdictions. We here in Scio have just over 15,000 voters, with about 13,500 of them as active, meaning that they've participated in a recent election. So every day throughout the year, part of the work is maintaining the voter rolls. We process updates to the qualified voter file, be it through public record, individual requests, or other records. The second general part of elections is actually administering the elections. It includes any elections called by any entity that Scio voters fall within, including those by Dexter School District or Ann Arbor School District, I'm also responsible for administering those elections. As you know, we are part Dexter and part Ann Arbor School District. Elections can be big. We can have over 11,000 votes cast, or they may be small. I've been part of one that had fewer than 1,000 votes cast. Well, the size of the election drives costs and level of coordination with the number of election inspectors that I must appoint, or the number of clerk's assistants I must appoint to help my deputy clerk and my deputy who works 32 hours a week with no benefits, Mary Gillis, just an outstanding public servant. But the work of big or small elections is really largely the same for the clerk in many ways, for the election administrator. All the steps have to be followed. All the processes need to be complete, no matter if it's a big or small election. There have been three major drivers of the expansion of the township's clerk's responsibilities as election administrator. Really, for any township or city clerk, these apply. In 2018, voters passed Prop 2, the first Promote the Vote, to amend the Constitution to provide same-day voter registration and no reason absentee voting and required weekend hours for the 2 weekends prior to each election. I have been carrying these out since our first election I've had 4 elections now that I've carried these out for. This has increased the complexity of requiring much more precise ongoing administration of registrations, applications, and absentee ballots in the clerk's office for a full 40 days prior to election day. There is no longer the same anticipation for build up to election day. It's much more of a constant flow of work through election day. The second major driver is the 2022 pandemic and 2020 disinformation campaigns, where we all started having a lot of concerns about physical safety, ballot security, potential political violence. All of that has really increased the real and perceived dangers that are part of participating in elections. I'm responsible for the safety of election inspectors, our 8 precinct polling places, our voters, and the security of the ballots. We have a wonderful partnership with the Sheriff's Department, the Secretary of State, FBI, cybersecurity, and we participate regularly in trainings and have very good coordination plans in place. But I will say this piece of the work did not used to be a part of the work, and it is now. Election laws that we had been trained on, we have actually had to start enforcing. For example, I had to personally escort out a bogus challenger out of a precinct in a recent election. So that sort of hands-on de-escalation training, we've actually all had de-escalation trainings, is a new part of the job. The third driver is the most recent 2022 constitutional amendments, Promote the Vote 2. And this is the early voting, which I know you had some interest in. We are just rolling out, the state is just rolling out the legislation, and we are still figuring out how we are going to do this, is the truth. But generally, what these changes mean for the job of the township clerk are threefold. First, there's going to be even more in-depth and complex administration of the qualified voter file, a database of voters, in order to accommodate mailing out ballots automatically to people without an application for each election, but still ensuring that their address is current. Internally, ongoing and year-round, this work will be expanded. The second one, I have to install a second drop box because I'm now required, because we have at least 15,000 voters, to have one. Our first drop box is here at Township Hall. With a second drop box in the community, I will have to develop a plan for security, for chain of custody of those ballots, and potential monitoring. And the third is early voting. Well, the constitutional amendment says at least 9 days. The legislature is encouraging 30. And so beginning in November of 2023, I will offer 9 days of early voting. In the future, it's very likely that it's going to expand to 30 days of early voting. I'm not quite sure yet, but my plan right now is to use Township Hall. So we are able to have early voting at one site. We will use Township Hall. And then on election day, we'll have the 8 precincts opened. What will it mean? It will be like having 9 to 30 days of running one very slow precinct. So there are a lot of protocols. There are a lot of processes. It is going to increase the work pretty dramatically. That will also be taking place where we will continue to have the very busy clerk's office, spurred by same-day registration and no reason absentee voting, and ongoing processing of absentee ballots. We're working out the details. I'm confident we'll figure it out. I thank the board for approving my budget request to hire the many election inspectors we will need. That said, the most challenging period for the job of the clerk will probably be that 8 days before election day, where we will begin counting the ballots. So it's not just early casting of ballots, it will become early counting of ballots. And procedurally, that's the piece that I think is going to be the most complex. Does anybody have any questions about my duties related to elections?
I have a
Okay.
question for you. Regarding, the development, developing a plan, is that something where does the state or the county work with you? Because I'm thinking a lot of this, you're not unique. I mean, there's a number of clerks and does the state or does the county promote that it would be done the same way across the board, or are you really on your own in terms of developing a plan?
Sure. That's a great question. The answer is somewhere in between. So locally, we have just announced, we are so fortunate to have Larry Kestenbaum and his team at the county because they provide a ton of guidance and support, including staffing our very, very strong Washtenaw County Clerks Association. And I'm so grateful to have those colleagues. We meet bi-monthly and strategize. We also have a very strong statewide Clerks Association, of which I'm a part. They have a strong lobbying arm, and we have regular meetings, talking about how we're going to do this. I think our Secretary of State has done a great job. Their Bureau of Elections Director is strong. They will promulgate some regulations. They are definitely investing in some of the upgrades to the qualified voter file, which is administered by the state. We're just catching up because I think it was just within the last week or two that the implementing legislation was even passed. But I do expect those regulations, and there'll be new trainings from the Secretary of State. Every 2 years, I'm required to become recertified as an election administrator by the state. And so I imagine, Monica, that training is probably going to be expanded, and they're going to require us to know a lot more so that we can implement this properly.
Thank you.
Question. In a typical month, I wonder how many voter registration, new registrations and changes of address actually come across your desk in paper form as opposed to coming to you through the Secretary of State's office based on new driver's license applications and driver's license changes of address. Just the proportion of one or the other.
Sure, and that proportion has changed. I would say prior to Promote the Vote 1 that implemented that motor voter kind of provision I think you're referring to. Prior to 2018, I'd say that proportion was about 40% across my desk, 60% from the state. And since then, I'd say it is closer to 10% across my desk and 90% from the state.
So you're talking about the earlier, much earlier motor voter legislation that happened, I think, earlier than 2018.
Apologies. No, I was referring to the reforms of 2018. I'm sorry that I missed.
2018 reforms, right. Okay. So that your paper burden in terms of data entry into QVF is less than it has been.
The paper burden has gone down.
Right.
The quality of the data has gone up. The number of registrants and the quality and accuracy of their addresses has gone up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica, are you running for the next election cycle?
What am I running? I am, yes, I am probably running. I'm not officially saying, I have not made my official decision, but I am probably, yes. I love the work. I love public service, and I hope that I'm making a positive difference.
We don't take that into consideration. We determine based on the position, not the person, but thanks for answering.
Yeah, you shouldn't.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The second, oh, sorry.
Hold on,
Yeah,
we have a
yeah.
question, Jeff?
Yeah, if I can get a question, it's kind of, before you came to our township as a clerk, how much influence did the salary of the clerk's position have on your interest here?
Well, I was the deputy clerk from 2017 to 2019, and I got paid $20 an hour. And I, had a full-time job, 2 kids, 2 working parents, 2 kids, professionals. So my hours were limited. I could not give as much time as I wanted to because I couldn't afford to. So certainly at the time that the board was soliciting applicants to apply to be appointed, I was very clear with the 2019 board of what my minimum salary requirement would be to bring it in line with other clerks, and also to be able to meet my minimum requirements for my family.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And I do have two other areas, but Monica, I don't know if you want me to go on to those or wait.
Jessica, if you could, first of all, we're interested, but we do have some time constraints. So if you could do it kind of quickly, because we certainly want to hear it, but we don't have all day, unfortunately. Thank you.
You got it. The second area is finance. My responsibilities for the accounting are spelled out primarily in MCL 41.65. So Scio Township long operated with a township clerk who did not directly carry out these accounting duties required of the clerk by statute. For a long time, the township clerk did not direct, oversee, or otherwise provide the independent oversight of these. As long as MCL 41.65 has been on the books, I don't know if it's 100 years, something like that, outside of Scio Township, every township clerk regularly carried out their responsibility for accounting. In big places, they direct the finance department. In small places, they're doing payroll and AP by hand, reconciling the bank statements, all of that. So there's a lot of systemic factors that have led to Scio's kind of oddball situation of being the only place where the clerk wasn't performing that function. It's not anybody's one person's responsibility or fault. It's a whole kind of collection of factors. But I do think that it led to some of the chronic deficiencies in accounting for the township that went unaddressed for so long. And I share this context because I know that some members of the 2019 board were surprised to learn that the clerk had these duties. They had not known, but they recognized the longstanding deficiencies in accounting and budgeting existed and hadn't known that this fundamental check and balance was missing. They supported the nascent capacity building and development of some of the necessary policies and procedures I was rolling out in partnership with all. So what the township clerk is responsible for, and what I do as much of as I can, but do not carry this out to any degree responsible because of the lack of sufficient qualified finance staff and because of the, I believe, illegal infringements of this board on my statutory duties to carry these out. The township clerk, I am responsible for every single accounting entry, the books, every single entry related to revenue, expense, liability, assets, fund balance, grants, payroll, capital assets. I'm responsible for developing policies for these, maintaining them. I'm responsible for signing off on payroll, accounts payable. I verify that all the claims for payment that come to the board are legal, are properly, have gone through our procurement policy. And I'm responsible for producing the balance sheet and the budget to actuals. The MTA recommends that the clerk does this quarterly. And so I won't comment here about the organized backlash that started taking place in 2021 by the new board. But I will tell you, it has been to the detriment of Scio Township. And I will continue to work toward being able to carry out my statutory duties and continue to put the necessary reforms in place to finally bring Scio Township into compliance with normal accounting practices, with the norms, and to get us sufficient qualified finance staff. So that's what I would say. I have developed several policies. We're making good progress, training staff, starting to bring the capacity up. And there have been disruptions to that. And I am doing my best to carry those out. The last section area is related to records. My responsibility for records are spelled out primarily in MCL 41.65. It's pretty straightforward. I'm the custodian of almost every township record, book, or paper, with few exceptions that are set forth in the statute. That means I'm responsible for keeping them safe, make sure nobody walks out the door with them, keeps them on their personal computer instead of a township server, and generally implement the records retention schedules that are set forth by the state. And I will partner with our new IT director, Chris Bailey, who I'm so glad has joined the township, to implement some sort of records retention schedule for all of our digital files. As some of you may know, records management is a field unto itself. Many clerks' offices have full-time records management people. But I say that because it is just another example of a whole nother discipline, the records management, accounting, and elections administration. I am responsible for taking minutes of the Board of Trustees, and I also provide advice to other committees on compliance with Open Meetings Act, particularly regarding public comment, minutes, public postings. I spearheaded the implementation of Zoom at Scio Township, the hybrid meeting hall equipment, and implementation of the ADA requirements related thereto. I maintain the code of ordinances. Currently, I'm updating the digital format we're in to use a digital codification service that's more cost-effective for the township and more user-friendly for both the user reading it as well as the clerk's office. I'm responsible for certifying which township record is true and correct. Records requests always come to me. The board can designate a FOIA coordinator, and they have as the manager. Nonetheless, when there's a question about what's what and where's the record, does it exist? That is my responsibility. Implemented the new website in 2020 for Scio Township. The first time that Scio has had dynamic content on our website. Christy and Fran and everybody's been awesome about all getting trained up and putting more and more content out there. We have published far more public information and records than ever before. And also about 2021-ish, we implemented a agenda management system to develop agenda packets for the board and for all of the committees to reduce the administrative burden of compiling paper packets and scanning them. It also helps to democratize the process internally so that department heads can add information, get it right to decision makers, and it improves the records on the back end after the meeting so that all of the actions of all of our bodies can be indexed and sortable in a digital database.
Jessica.
That's it.
That's great information. You've given us a lot to think about and given us insight to, all the areas that you touch. I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners here if there's any other questions, but we have about 3 minutes because we need to move this on.
Yeah, I'm done. Do you have any questions?
Anybody have additional questions? Well, happy birthday to your dad.
Diane has.
Oh, sorry.
Just, so with all these changes, particularly right now in the legislature with the 8 days of early voting, that means you and your deputy clerk are responsible for the staffing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we are responsible for the staffing.
Right, anytime. But it's probably more people that you're going to have to.
Oh, absolutely. So for example, on every single day of early voting, we will have at least, unless the rules change, I will assign 4 people for every single day. We will need 4 election inspectors for every single day of early voting. It'll be just like a regular precinct. You have to have a minimum of 3. I assume we'll have 4. I don't believe we're going to have the full 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. day, but we do have to have some reasonable number of hours. So I'm planning to develop an early voting team, some of my best, election workers from the precincts and train them up specially. And so in running an election, the clerk's office is managing a lot, running from precinct to precinct, troubleshooting. And then at the end of the night, there's the custody of ballots that have been cast for multiple days. And then for those 8 days of counting, there's the new complex processes of having multiple counts because all of the counts on election day.
Yeah, we need to move on.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't see your body language. I apologize.
Well, happy birthday to your dad.
Yes.
Have an extra piece of cake and drive safe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
you.
Justin.
Bye.
Gosh, I'm learning all kinds of stuff about the township I've lived in for 30 years here.
What year did you move in?
92. I guess that we're on 31. Yeah, next.
35 years for me this week.
Yeah.
It's
34, 35.
You're 35 too?
2002.
We just got everything re-landscaped. Gardens have gone out of control.
It's funny how your yard kind of outgrows itself.
Right.
Yeah. I'm sad out this morning looking at a blue spruce tree that's probably gonna need to come down this year. Just we're losing so many of those and they were so beautiful.
There's like a moment when everything is just the right size, and the right space, and you're like, yes. And then it grows.
It's in the past.
Yeah,
So,
it's a memory.
Well, you gotta have a good tree firm around to help you
Yeah.
take those things out. There's some local guys that are good.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of new roses and new shrubs planted over the week. And, so I'm busy watering and fertilizing and correcting the little details and stuff. It's a good early morning activity.
Yeah.
And getting rain doesn't hurt this today.
Rain good.
Yeah.
It's supposed to rain Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday too.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Hello,
Hi,
Donna.
Donna.
Thank you so much for,
Oh, you want me over here?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, on this side of the
Get
table.
the important side now.
And it can be, yes, it is.
Donna, first of all, thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
So you
We read about the statutes and know of your history and all that you've touched, and at the same time, it's not like hearing it firsthand. But, we've got a few things going on, so we want to hear everything, and at the same time, if we could keep it to about 15 minutes, and we'll have some question and answers. People will ask questions as you go along.
want me to keep to 15 minutes?
No. Maybe it's less, maybe it's more, whatever it should be, but we're just we're trying to manage the time.
Okay.
So with that, if you could tell us about your day and your responsibilities and the demands of your position, we'd appreciate hearing about it.
Well, my duties are collecting the taxes, making sure all monies that come in the door are properly taken care of. And that involves, now we're on the off season for taxes right now. The bills will be going out in 2 weeks. So that's a big part of this next year until the end of February. Money every day comes in and we make sure it's, recorded properly, balanced. And I have a person, it's to the penny, and it doesn't go out the door and to the bank. And I deposit, our bank is Bank of Ann Arbor, very fine bank, community bank, very involved in their community. They do a lot. And then I don't balance the statements. Years ago I did, but no, not now, because as we've grown, we have different people doing that check and balance, and it works out better. That's the statutory main part. I do investments too, by the way, and we're very strictly governed by Public Act 20. And I follow Public Act 20. So, and I also work with the institutions that we deal with, and they are representatives of public funding departments. So they know the rules, they help guide me through and, make sure we're all doing it right.
Sure.
So, and then that's the main thing. Probably the most difficult and ongoing part of my job is personal property tax, which is the business tax on furniture, fixture, and equipment, is at the local level, stays right here. It doesn't go to the county like the delinquent land building taxes does. So that's an ongoing, constant, trying to collect. And I do try to work with the businesses. I know what I can do, but I would prefer not knocking on the door and noticing you. And if you don't pay, shutting you down and selling your stuff, because I can seize it. I don't want to do that. Once I had to, but it was an unusual situation. And so we did auction off, but I could only auction enough to get enough money to pay the bill. And what they did with the rest of it, I don't know, because I was out of it at that point. So that's an ongoing thing. COVID hit, creating this thing to start working our way through again. I had everything current, and then COVID happened. So we're not current now, but people are still working with me. We'll get there. So that's another main part, more difficult part of my job. Those collections, I'm required to disperse once a month. Regular tax collections, by the way, we disperse twice a month. 15th and the 30th is the time period, and we must have it out to them. I think it's within 2 weeks, but we try to get it out, pull the report and get it right out. Send the checks to the units of government. So it sounds kind of simple, but the telephone's ringing and people are walking in the door and it doesn't always go so quickly.
Never quite as easy as it sounds.
But the best part of my job is working with the people. And that's what I was just doing when Christy went to get me, working with a gentleman trying to figure out his budget for the potential fire department request. So that's fun. I told him, I says, well, you get your tent and I'll get my tent and we'll live under the bridge together. I mean, I have fun, but I give him as best as I can information.
Sure.
Being on the board, part of, the board decisions for the township. That's, again, a very important part of the job, being as informed as you can and hoping you say yay or nay, and it's a good decision. So it's, again, to me, it's been exciting being part of what's changed in this township in the last long time. So, but that's another important part. Many treasurers are just like an accounting employee, but not in township government. So I can't think of it.
Do you have any involvement in maintaining the general ledger?
No.
Or is that the clerk's job?
That responsibility is under the clerk's job. Now, what I was telling you is my statutory responsibility in the same fashion. But in Scio Township, in many areas, one person can't do all of that anymore, so you have staff now. But the responsibility is still in your duties to make sure it's done correctly. But no, I do not have anything to do with that.
I was curious about personal property tax for a business. This is just my own curiosity. How do they self-value their property?
There's a process. We have what they call the personal property tax statement that assessing sends out. And of course, there's been some big changes in the last, I don't know how many years now. They have to, if they're above 180,000 in market value, then they have to fill out what we call the long form, the statement. But now that 180,000 is a relatively recent change. Well, Governor Snyder started it with 80,000 and then it's been increased in the last couple of years. So if your value is less than 180,000, you get the small business exemption, no tax, if you fill out the form. And of course now, if we can get them, if they just open the envelopes and fill out the form, they only have to file it once. They used to have to file it every year. So a lot of good things are happening to streamline the system and help the small business people. But we still have some that don't open the envelope. So we keep working with them.
That's a tough one.
Well,
So if they report less than 180, they have to report every year, is that how?
no. They have the ability for the small exemption, small business exemption, but they must fill out that form.
To get the exemption.
That's right, but they only have to do it once. And if you go over that, you're honest and you're going to fill out the long form or let us know. That's the way we treat everybody. So they have to do it once. The long form, they have to do every year if they're in that range going up.
What's involved in the mobile home specific tax?
You really want my opinion on it?
I hadn't heard of it until I got involved in
okay.
this commission side.
Well, this is, again, a twofold thing. The property, the owner of the park property is paying taxes like you and I on his property. The mobile home owners are only paying $3 a month. That's the mobile home tax that you may hear. And 2 of that goes to the county. Nope, I gotta back off. 2 of that goes to the state ed fund. 50 cents goes to the county. I think I'm right on that, Jim. I was thinking Jim Frank too.
I'm not a property tax expert. Maybe.
And then 50 cents comes to us. That's all we get from those homes. And as you know, there's some pretty substantial residences now. It's not when this was established way back when, and it was much different.
Okay.
But that's what that is.
Thank you.
So, Donna, for the personal property tax that businesses pay, do they pay twice a year like we do for our property? Okay.
Yes, all taxes are billed out twice a year. Actually, now you understand we're assessed, we're told what to collect for a whole year. And then half in some instances determined by the school district. And Ira collects half in the summer and half in the winter. Dexter Schools collects all in the winter. So that determines the billing process for the individual school district. But yes. Yes.
Okay, and I've asked different people this question. You're a little different because you've been the treasurer here for a while, but if you can think back to when you first were interested in this position, how important was the salary to you at that time?
I never asked. I really was excited about maybe being able to be appointed treasurer. I was appointed. The previous treasurer had retired. So.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I've always looked at it as a way to contribute. The salary never determined anything for me. And I'm being really truthful.
Okay.
Jim?
For fire protection, why is the township pursuing a special assessment district rather than a direct millage?
The history behind that, Jim, is when we established our own fire department, we were first of all, we were part of the area-wide, and then we pulled out and became our own. But the village of Dexter was still under the purview of Scio Township. I collected the taxes. They had their own summer operating levy. In that summer tax that they billed out was their cost for their fire car department, their cost. We decided to set it up as a special assessment district because you can define the border. So we were not going to be charging them also, which would have been totally wrong. So that's why it's a special assessment district. We talked about that in the last month, I think it was brought up. If we couldn't go to just the levy. And there's some reason why we can't change it at this point. But it's called a special assessment. But it is still based on the taxable value and the amount that the fire department says they need to operate for that upcoming year.
Does this one have a time limit?
The upcoming one?
Yeah, the new special assessment district, yes.
Well, we don't know for sure yet because we're still working on the language.
So so we don't have a ballot language yet?
Not complete ballot language, we're working on it. And it'll be before the voters in November.
Participated in putting together a number of special assessment districts
Okay,
with the Board of Public Works.
okay.
And they always had a 5 or 8 year renewal.
Right, and I can't answer your question just because of where we are. Most special assessments are set up that way, especially if it's a neighborhood thing.
Right.
You know, if it's for roads or whatever, most of them we've had have been for neighborhood roads. And they are a specific time period and handled totally different than some special assessments that we all have to live with. So.
I have a follow-on question to John's comment. So based on the duties, and I think it's full-time, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Do you think that whoever holds the office as a full-time position would be interested in what the salary level is
At this point,
to consider taking on the, running for the election and taking it on?
I don't know.
I think some people would, some people wouldn't.
I think it's a personal kind of thing.
But it's a lot of work. I mean, it's a full-time position.
Yeah, but I do have help. I do need the help, but
Right, but it's still a full-time position.
but it can be very flexible. I happen to think if I'm being paid full-time, I should be here full-time. Yeah, I take a vacation and
Yeah.
but
How you get worked out.
I treat it like an everyday job.
Right. I asked this question of the other folks, are you planning on running for the next cycle?
No, and I've been making that known as I've talked to people. No, I am going to retire.
It's time.
Well, new eyes, new ideas, new ways of doing things. I mean, any process can be refined. And that's okay.
Well, first of all, thanks for,
Thanks for your
all
service.
your history
thank
alone.
you.
And when you walk out the door, Donna, you're taking a lot of history with you. And I think that history that you've provided has been very valuable. And I really respect your perspective in terms of, new ideas can be good. And I think that just kind of in terms of retirement, sometimes with people, it's somebody else's turn. So first of all, thank you for, I'm not ending her comments here. I'm just personally saying you've been extremely valuable and very appreciative for what you brought to the table.
Do you realize the friends I've made
Oh, I bet.
over the years?
Yeah, I bet.
There's a guy I worked with for a few years.
And I enjoyed it.
We had good terms together. So.
So any other questions for Donna? Well, Donna, it's a Friday. Go forth and conquer. Thank you for all that you do. Thanks for taking the time and giving us this insight because it's very
If you have other
valuable.
questions, give me a holler,
We will.
And you're right, I am a walking history book and I love history, so I'm always available.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Donna.
all right, you guys do a good job too, thank you.
Donna was a real asset on the board. We didn't always agree on things, but it was never, it was always a civil conversation. And that's a good thing.
Well, in our last meeting, we talked about inflation, just in terms of getting perspectives on what does inflation look like? Last year has been eye-opening, and at the same time, we're looking at it over a period of time. And Jim, I believe you were going to be taking a look at some things, and other people very well may
We
have.
set out a
And Kathleen, your
table
data's
of the
still there.
different types and then some explanations of them. And you can see the cumulative over the last 2 years, 21 and 22, where we have annual averages available. The rates of increase have been pretty strong between 14.5 and 13 3/4. So that's a substantial number. If we were to use any of the CPI number, we'd be recommending a substantial over 10% increase for everyone or anyone. The other thing I wanted to get is at the bottom line of that table, or the last line of the table, where we looked at the property tax increase limit by proposal A and Headley. And there it's 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever's least.
Right.
There, over time, we'd come up with 10% and 5% in each of the 2 years, 2021 and 22. The people here in the township are experiencing, the cumulative change in the various CPI measures. Okay, no argument about that. Some more than others. Okay. Taxpayers are experiencing the changes in property tax increases and the limited amount of it. And I would suggest that we take a look maybe a little bit more at using the property tax escalator and its limits rather than inflation, simply because it's not just because it's lower, but because it's what everybody in the township experiences and sees in the bills that they receive in the winter and the summer every year. It's what their taxes are based on. That said, here's the information.
Right. So at one point you talked about CPIW,
Right.
and that's used to adjust for Social Security,
That's your SSI inflation.
right? Is that used for anything else?
CPIU is the most commonly mentioned one on the news.
Okay.
It's the urban.
Oh, yeah, okay,
person,
yeah.
Okay. And CPIW is for urban people in the workforce. And that's, again, what Congress has decided to use for Social Security.
So do we consider the Ann Arbor metro area an urban area?
It is for census purposes, yeah.
I'm sorry, Jim, can you repeat? You just said, I think you said that it was a CPIW that is now being used, or that Congress wanted to use? Is that what you?
That's what Congress has decided, mandated to use
Okay,
to inflate your Social Security.
okay, thank you.
And the CPIU is the one that gets most talked about on the news. The others are for
Rural,
rural and retiree and so forth,
right?
which may not have that much meaning in this area.
So if I understood, you just advocated for using the property tax equalization
Yeah,
versus CPIU?
yeah. I think, what we're charged with doing is coming out with a recommendation. One, that compensates the elected officials in the township, or that number one does that, but number two, that seems fair to the people who have to pay for it, which is the taxpayers. And 5% per annum equalization number is what they see on their tax bills. They might be more somewhere up.
In fact, have our taxes gone up 5% each year? Okay, going up this year.
They go up 5% each year unless you turn over the property. If you buy a new house, that's the purchase price is what it's valued at. But valuations can go up by 5%.
So that's, okay, so if you think about a person's expendable income, all officers and trustees live in the township. So assuming they own a house, yes, that's a 5% increase, but they still have increase in anything else, cost of living. So why wouldn't we use the CPIU instead?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think the thought is, and we had talked about this in a previous meeting, that even though we all acknowledge the inflation rate is, upwards of 7%, not every taxpayer has had that on their income side. They've felt that on their expense side. And for our commission proposition to the taxpayers of our community, limiting that to the reference they've already seen and township income being, both those are tied to the 5%, that might be perceived as a more fair way to increase the compensation as opposed to just using the consumer price index.
Something else I think just in terms of our commission is in the past, this commission didn't exist. So the board voted to give themselves raises. And I don't think that was probably very popular, in terms of, I'm gonna give myself a raise, oh yeah, you go guy. But now that you have the commission in place, that, one time I worked for a bank way back in the day, and you'd get an annual increase. It wasn't substantial, but when you looked at it over a period of time, it became substantial. And thinking that this commission is going to be meeting every other year, and I'm thinking that the commission will be able to make those adjustments ongoingly, where they haven't been able to do that. The board hasn't done that in the past. So I think just as, we're deciding what information we're using, we got a little bit more art and science going on here in terms of representing our fellow neighbors, our fellow Scio Township residents, recognizing that we want our officials to be compensated, and just trying to find the fairness in that in terms of, what people are comfortable with. But I do think I have I'm glad that this commission exists so that people can meet it ongoingly. Our governor, our Secretary of State, those high offices, their raises have to come from the state legislature, has to be approved by that. Well, nobody's voting for those people getting any raises because it's not popular. Having this commission, we can, put that forth. Now, what the board does with it, is out of our hands, but, I think that there's more opportunity to make annual or semi-annual or biannual, every other year adjustments that hasn't been in existence before.
So I believe that for township staff, they do an annual COLA increase.
I would think they would.
Well, they come and call it.
Right. Yeah. Which I think would be more in line with the CPIU.
Should be. Well, it depends on what the board agrees,
Yeah, I'm not sure what source they use, but.
I would think that, getting specific, for the trustees, a 10% across the board increase would be practical and would be consistent with what taxpayers have seen over the past 2 years. And might give us the basis for, consistent way of operating sometime into the future. Treasurer, supervisor, clerk, maybe we need to have some more discussion.
Yeah, as a adjunct to that, I like that idea in terms of the supervisors and in terms of the trustees and going along with that. And I also like the idea that the other positions we might want to make specific individual adjustments for, primarily for the treasurer position, I think, because that's where I think our current compensation is out of alignment, significantly out of alignment with what it would take to get the qualifications that we need to be looking for on the incoming end. So yeah, in an effort to kind of move things forward, I would propose maybe going a little bit higher than the 10% on the trustee compensation, maybe go to the 11% number, recognizing that they do have in that position the incoming people do have lots of other things they could be doing with their time. And even though we know the compensation isn't a big motivator for the trustee position, I do want to reflect that as citizens of the township, we perceive value in that, and we want to acknowledge that.
So another 1% would be $75. So that's basically, yeah, right.
It's not a whole lot, but yes.
And, okay, so we're gonna focus on trustees right now, and then we'll transition to the other positions.
Whatever you want to do, I'm just in the conversation.
I was just
so-
looking at the agenda.
I think, I had on here in terms of additional demands of early voting, which I think Jessica
Yeah.
addressed. And I probably should have taken that off as I amended the agenda to, acknowledge that people were actually going to be speaking. So I think we can just cut that one right
Yeah, I
out.
think we got the detail.
In terms of, we do, one thing we need to touch on, I think in terms of, we had a review of compensation for meetings, and just for, is that the Planning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, and any pre-app meetings, the PC, Planning Commission attends, only relate to board members and committees that they are on and meetings that they attend. And one of the things for myself that I was thinking about is in terms of paid for meetings and, salaries versus paid by meetings, I'm thinking, I don't think it's under our realm to say, we're gonna pay you by meeting and we think this or think that. I think we're here to talk about how much they should be paid. I think that if the board wants to change how that structure is, that's on them to change it. That's not on us to tell them what to do. I think our responsibility is to say, this is how much we think your salary should be. So that's my 2 cents on, being paid or not paid for meetings. And one of the things that I looked up, just that when I looked up some other townships that were more paying for meetings, and we talked about this before, I think this might be in Pittsfield, where their compensation was less, their salary was less because of their meetings. And the more I thought about that, I thought, I don't know how, I don't know if it's right for us to be making a recommendation on how it should be structured. I think that's a board decision. I don't know what other people's 2 cents are on that, but that's kind of my thought on that.
So we are evaluating for level of effort, though.
And I think, in terms of with their salaries.
Yeah, and so Pam Boyd's communication talks about the difference in staffing levels between comparables. And it does impact the level of effort.
I did look up Pittsfield Township, even though it's a charter township. But I look at it as a comparison, and what their staffing is.
They're big government.
Yeah, they are big government, but they do have an area that takes all questions from residents and runs with it. And I looked at several of the minutes of the different board of trustees meeting minutes. And I didn't see any time where a trustee spoke and said, or what their involvement was in a certain meeting or commission or whatever they happened to be a part of. So we know that our trustees some people spend an exorbitant amount of time dealing with resident concerns.
I think that's.
And same as the supervisor.
Yeah, when you run
you
for,
know?
if you're a public official, that's part of the deal.
But if you're a trustee in one township and there's a resident concern, you have this group you pass it off to and say, hey, could you research this for me? Instead of the trustee in Scio Township researching it themselves.
So the level of effort is much greater.
Well, we have some situations in Scio Township where instead of referring it to the supervisor or to the board, trustees choose to take the issues on as an advocate themselves. Okay, and I think that's different from official duties.
Somebody has an interest in something.
And I think we talked about, a little bit of discussion about paying for meetings, per diem for meetings. And some trustees may have another full-time job and don't have the time commitment that other people that don't have a full-time job. So I would rather make it equal across as much as we can. So having a trustee's salary increase by 10, 11% to me makes more sense than paying for meetings.
Me too. And I think that 10%.
And if they want to bring that up, like you said,
Yeah.
the board can bring that up.
And I think 10% with the 10, 11% with the trustees, I think that's, from where they're at and, with the history, I think that's a great start. And I think the commission in another, year and a half, 2 years, when they meet again, to be able, to acknowledge that and continue that movement, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And we have a basis for that, fundamentally in terms of assessed value limits.
Right, yeah, that's value.
And I'm still going to advocate for level of effort. And it is greater, and whether it's someone has a full-time job and they can only commit so much.
It's their choice to run for trustee. As I'm thinking, if I've got a full-time job, I'm choosing to get involved. Nobody's holding my, it's not like my day job that are saying, you gotta get this done, Monica.
Well, I think we should show some appreciation for that volunteerism. It's not just volunteerism.
I think that we are. And I think that being a trustee is a bit of an honor. I don't think it's something where, the fact that, your community thinks that you are a strong advocate on their behalf, I think that's an honor.
Kathleen,
What was your idea?
yeah, I wanted to go back. I wasn't sure you finished what you were saying about compensating more based on level of, I think you said level of effort, but then I got distracted or something. I didn't catch the rest of.
Well, I think there is a level of effort that's over and above what our comparable townships are that we're
Okay.
looking at.
Okay, all right. So that was your comparison. Yeah.
It's the nature of Scio Township and how they've historically determined staffing, which has not kept up with the level of work involved. As we ramped up to a 1.5 billion taxable value, there's effort with that. More citizens, there's effort with that. And I think it shows if somebody, yes, is willing to put themselves out there and do get elected, it's appreciation for the effort. And I would like to see more than 10%,
Yeah.
basically.
So I want to respond to that. I hear what you're saying. I think the ideal solution would be to have more township staff to be able to, moderate the requirements of the trustee, kind of like you'd mentioned. Actually, a couple of you mentioned it earlier in the meetings, and that was kind of the angle my lovely wife, I think, was trying to get to with her email too.
Bless you, lovely wife.
Yeah, lovely wife. And hopefully we're already in that direction now. We've hired a hotshot, manager person, and hopefully we'll have, some other new people on staff to make things a little bit easier on the trustees in the years going forward.
And I don't see an initiative by this board to increase staff. So the finance director should be a direct replacement. It's been 2 years. The IT person is a direct replacement to contracted services. What else have we added? The HR position, which is not filled, was determined to be a half-time position. And again, that's almost 2 years ago, has not been filled. So I don't see a general embracing of filling these staff positions by this board.
I agree with you, and I think that's up to the board to make that a higher priority. I'm kind of looking at it from the other end of it. The board has the ability to move on that and apparently hasn't on a number of those items for in some cases going on 2 years. I'm thinking that maybe they should, and if they did, so let's say they do, next month, they get the 3 positions you mentioned filled, then in theory, the trustees wouldn't have as much of a after hours load, right? Or a out of meeting type obligation. So that's just my thought, and all of you are looking at me like I'm crazy, so I may be crazy, but that's still my thought.
No, it's all logical, right? It's all very logical. If the board chose to staff at different levels, I haven't seen it go into effect. I don't know when it will go, and I'm still more inclined to compensate based on effort.
I think it's difficult to do that. An individual's effort may vary through the 4-year term. And we're setting, a salary level or a compensation level that's going to last for at least 2 years. One of the limiting factors here is that Scio Township is still a common law township. Okay, whereas all of the other townships in Washtenaw County that have experienced growth like ours and property value gains like ours are charter townships. And I think that limits the level of taxation and what we can afford in terms of people. Now, we've also seen, I think, a big change in terms of hiring a highly compensated township administrator. And that may bring some changes along too, depending upon how he ends up working with the board. Still, he or she,
Yeah.
or they,
That
or
person.
whatever. Yeah. Again, I think those are on one hand, decisions for the Board of Trustees or decisions for the voters in Scio Township.
And that's one thing we didn't ask all 4 trustees. Are you planning on running again?
No, Catherine.
Oh, we didn't have
we have talked to the
No,
trustees,
no,
yeah.
we haven't talked.
We
I
did.
mean,
Well, not the
2
trustees.
were appointed and 2 were elected.
All right, so, never mind, go ahead.
What is your idea, Kathleen?
Well, I was trying to find this balance between how much effort they have to do with the unstated policy that they have to be on additional committees.
Well, is this something where, do we want to vote on things today? I think when it comes time to voting, we should vote on all 4 positions at the same time. I don't think we should vote on one today and vote on one next week or what have you. And that's, for us to decide, I mean, that's kind of my thought of it. And I was thinking that with the time that we took to hear, from our elected officials, that today would be a good day to have the discussion, and that next week we can take a vote in terms of, well, where are our thoughts on this? Because certainly we want to make a thoughtful vote. And I think just kind of digesting the information, that's my thoughts. I don't know if other people are.
Actually, I support that. Yeah, I mean, that would be fine. We just talk more today and then maybe
It is a
next week.
talking thing.
Yeah, maybe next week, try and make some decisions.
Regarding the trustee, do we have any other, we've got some thoughts here. Do we want to continue this conversation, or would we like to move on to the treasurer?
I'm good with moving on to the treasurer.
Yeah, okay, me too. So I'm going to pick up just quickly, from what John said in terms of, I think that there wasn't an increase to the treasurer made last, when we were together here. And I looked up some information and I looked at some things on the other side of the state, a couple different townships. And one of them was Texas Township, one of them was Kalamazoo Township. Their population was similar to ours, their incomes were similar to ours, and west side, east side, there's a little difference there, but I was just looking at the numbers. And they were talking about, in terms of they had a commission or they had a group in terms of trying to figure out the salaries and how difficult it is to find the information and to be able to make those comparisons. But one of the things I got from reading this, and these aren't, I'm just kind of throw it out there for what I learned, was they came up with the averages in terms of what the average supervisor, clerk, and treasurer, where those numbers were. And the treasurer's was, I think this was printed in January, $71,193. And I actually thought, it was kind of like a place to start.
Was that for each of the townships?
They just took an average,
Oh, okay.
in terms of, from the information that they were looking at,
Okay.
because they were kind of like in the same boat that we were in, in terms of how do you make these comparisons? And you've got big business in Pittsfield, we're not big business, and we may very well be moving in that direction, but we're not there today. And also too, going back to being sensitive to, I might really sound like a broken record on this, but I had listened to I went and I watched the meeting for the fire station. And it was very clear to me in that what I came across with that is people are very sensitive about how we're spending the money and wanting to be responsible with that. And wanting to make thoughtful decisions here that our neighbors can accept, and also that this isn't going to be stagnant as it has in the past. The opportunity for those cost of living adjustments that they haven't really had that easy opportunity in the past. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, but I agree with you that I don't think that our the salary for the treasurer is in line with the job.
Where were the other positions, the supervisor and the clerk?
You gotta be careful. Texas Township is charter, the supervisor duties are greater. And they typically don't have a manager.
I thought that I'd throw those in once we got to
Oh,
those
okay.
positions
All right.
versus clouding the.
But, when you say that they came up with average, I would like to see what did they use as their source?
As I said, I just, I didn't call them up, talk to them. I just looked at the recordings of the information that they had.
And what has changed for the treasurer's position is the tax rolls. Because previously the assessor took care of the tax rolls. I don't know how much time that encompasses, but it is a very detail-oriented, analytical type of work. But remember and this is maybe why last year, then we have a deputy treasurer who makes $40,000 more than the treasurer right now. So that deputy treasurer was a deputy treasurer light before the finance director went into that position, because it was somebody that backed up Donna when she was on vacation.
Right.
Wasn't doing the day-to-day work because they had another full-time job.
Right.
I also agree that $65,000 a year is not an appropriate salary for that position.
And given that Donna's planning on retiring, in November, we'd like to be able to attract a professional, or someone with professional qualifications to that position. And $65,000, I don't think does that very well. So what's appropriate?
Well, I think our comparables are still Washington County, the townships that have been suggested.
You recall those numbers?
Oh, yeah, I got them on my board.
Oh, still on the board then?
Oh, they're there, all right.
There we are, yes.
They're in the 90s.
So that's not a dry erase board. So
It is.
But that's that data is just for, Pittsfield, and then why? Oh, why is it
Ypsilanti.
Ypsilanti? Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of,
More big business.
Ypsilanti and Pittsfield are number one and number two in terms of population. Scio is number three in terms of township population in Washington County. So those are reasonable comparables. When we look at our gross property value, I think we're right after Pittsfield Township. Pittsfield just has the most.
Well, I think our architectural value is higher than Pittsburgh's.
I looked at the assessor's report, equalization report. And I think just Pittsfield Township, because it's got more industrial property. and a lot of the industrial property printing firms, particularly along the Jackson corridor.
You know, we put an addition on our house a couple of years ago too, so I'm sure that kind of influences that a lot.
Screen porch, absolutely.
Yeah, screen porch, yeah.
We got a permit though, so.
Yeah. So I'm thinking we need to be over 80,000 for that position. How much higher we go is still subject to debate, but if we all agree to that, that would at least get us in the right direction.
I have a tough time with that level of a raise. I'm sure I can get there, but it's, you know, I think if we could keep it under 80, like 75, 78,000, I think that's with the idea that this is going to continue to increase, that it's, I think that sends a better message to the Scio Township residents.
I guess I have a hard time believing we could get somebody with the adequate skill set and with a limited, you know, pool of candidates.
You have faith that it's going to be an adequate person that's going to run.
Now, if we increase.
That's a good point. All right, I'll give you that
If we
point.
went up from 65 to by 10%, that would be 71,500.
Yeah, you know, I've been the one that said I would like to use data in our analysis and not gut feel. And we have some data that we're not looking at. If they're comparable, they're comparable, you know.
You're talking about that data that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think that those are, you know, bigger townships, you know, population. I think they have big government. As I said, I think that we're kind of moving to be a bigger government, understandably so. But I don't think we're there yet. And consequently, I'm hesitant to jump in full throttle today. I think it's a process.
I'm just thinking if we can get some comparison of when we heard from Donna, she's collecting the taxes and dispersing, you know, to proper things. But look at what does the data show as far as how much money is coming into those comparable townships?
Yeah.
And the investments that have to be managed. I don't know how we would get that.
Well, they should be in there, they should have reports on that. Investments reports are mandated by statute.
That's right.
Yeah, so I just have trouble seeing that level of the qualifications that I would like to have for that position in our township would be available, you know, at a compensation level like that. And it's like I you know, in terms of the compensation, and my background is, some of you know, is in engineering, and I have a recent
You're
family
numbers
member.
guy.
Beg your pardon?
You're a numbers guy.
Well, but family recently in that marketplace too, not myself, but other family members. And a fresh out engineer would be earning, you know, a smart fresh out engineer would be earning that level, 80,000, 85,000 in that range. And so I wouldn't expect an experienced, responsible, somebody with a track record coming in for a treasurer position to not have that kind of, eye for that kind of event. Of course, you're the person that probably has much more background than I do in compensations, but I'll officially defer to you, Diane, so.
Well, for a position that's, the University of Michigan does not have they do have that's a high level position, but looking for somebody that works with the funds in a department would be a financial analyst, probably a senior financial analyst, which would be about between 75 to 85,000.
Okay.
Just new.
Kind of the neighborhood,
Yeah.
that's what we're thinking.
And again, 11% gets us to 72,150. So,
I think this position has suffered from dual duties of the assessor doing part of that job up until 2021. So the reality is that the duties are fully fall to the position, whereas they didn't before. So maybe it was fair prior, but to take a percentage and apply it, I don't think it's fair for the work. So whatever you determine, you have other townships that have done analysis and they see the treasurer and clerk as comparable levels of effort.
Yes.
And I think we're behind the times. And we had a treasurer who was okay with that.
And I understand looking at the numbers you have up there, that there's similar levels of compensation. But from what I've been exposed to just on this committee, it seems like the clerk is more responsibility. But I think Monica pointed out that when you have a deputy, either deputy treasurer or deputy clerk, there are always interactions on how much work actually gets done and how much delegation gets done between those positions. But in terms of what I've just been exposed to here, the last couple of weeks and 2 years ago, it seems like the clerk is the more valuable position than the treasurer. And that's why I could see in the, like I was mentioning, 80,000 range for the treasurer, but I think the clerk position needs to be compensated beyond that point. Now you're saying you need to bring the treasurer up to the clerk compensation.
I'm just looking at other communities that did the analysis and however they came up with it.
Yeah, okay.
And, I'm open to what that should be.
Okay.
But I don't think 71 is a fair compensation at all.
I agree. I'm totally with you.
yeah, I agree. 71 is just a throwout. We need to be able to attract, a new candidate.
You threw out a red herring at us right on this table here. And
I threw out a base for you.
Okay, all right.
But where does the treasurer fall?
What numbers are we looking at? Or no, you're asking, what's your question?
Now, I guess, where should Scio Township fall? We're looking at 93 in Ypsilanti and 97 in Pittsfield. Both of them deal with a lot more tax records, a lot more tax, things coming in. The dollar value maybe of taxes coming in may be different, but the number of transactions, if we pay them 50 cents per transaction, what would it be?
I don't want to go there.
No.
No, it's a fair point. It's level of effort,
No, well, that's, yeah, right. I
Which
mean,
is
we've got 21,000 people.
right?
Ypsi Township's closer to 50.
Now, we have like 18,000 because of the loss of Dexter.
Dexter, right.
And if you look at households, it's something like 6,900 households.
And so we're probably talking about 15,000 tax parcels.
Well, we've got 6,900 households.
Right,
Okay, so
that was from,
9,000 tax parcels.
I think it's 69.
Well, no, you're talking households versus parcels, because the parcels includes
Well, yeah, I should have said,
business.
yeah, this whole parcels thing is a new concept for me. You have a parcel, how big is your parcel?
Yeah.
100 acres, mine's at 1 acre.
Parcels is the unit for
I know,
assessment and taxation.
yeah, I know, so I have
And
to.
that's basically how many bills you send out.
So I think that is available from the assessor, and that's where
Yes.
I get that number from.
Yeah.
So the question would be, does it include all parcels, meaning businesses? And I think it does, because
Sure.
That's the number.
that was
The
the,
only ones that might not be included might be nonprofits, like the University of Michigan hospitals, charitables, that sort of stuff.
So Kathleen, I didn't understand, the 6,900, are you saying that is parcels as opposed to households?
yes, so
Oh, okay.
I'm using the phrase that's not correct.
Okay, I understand.
So we can go to the assessor and find out.
It's not that far off.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that far off, but then there's a lot of parcels that are owned by commercial and nonprofit.
But I think the
Our households.
6,900 is recent assessor's report, we can verify it.
Yeah, let's verify that.
Because I was looking at tax generation if we continued in SAD and how much it would generate. For roads, sorry, because that was,
Not for compensation of the,
right, so that's why that number is in my head.
We could ask them to give us information by property type, so we can get agricultural and residential and.
Do we need to go to that level?
I don't think so.
I don't know. What we want to know is,
Overkill.
what we want to know is how many tax bills get sent out and how many checks get sent in.
I know, Jim, so we talked about CPI, next thing I know, you sent me 8 of them.
yeah.
Well,
there are 8. Who knew?
We'll probably have more next week.
Yeah, that's-
Okay, but tax parcels in Scio, let's just get the number.
And do we want to get the tax parcels for the other
Yeah,
towns?
do you have to do like to like?
Right, and you'll find that municipalities with more small lot residential, like Pittsfield and Ypsilanti Township in particular, have a higher burden of tax collection,
Right,
more letters.
I could definitely see that in Ypsi Township. Smaller lot size.
More quarter acre lots. Yeah. Okay.
Any other conversation on the treasure? I'll take this as a no.
No. We all agree that the salary needs to be
Yes, we
adjusted
do.
upwards.
Yes, we do. And to your point with that, that senior analyst, that was good information in terms of who would, if we were hiring somebody, who would we be competing with in terms of compensation?
And that we should consider the burden proxy in terms of tax parcels in those 3 municipalities,
Right.
Pittsfield and Ypsilanti and Scio. I know I can get the Pittsfield stuff in a moment. I don't know about Ypsilanti. Well, I can contact the equalization.
But yeah, some of this is available on,
Completed the treasurer discussion, move on to the clerk discussion.
I think, the clerk's presentation was articulate.
Very much
and
so.
comprehensive. Much more detail than we allowed time for, but still comprehensive and shows that her understanding of these things, of the things that she does, is in depth. I heard her say that she saw more voter registration information in paper crossing her desk than it turns out to be, okay? Just because of the way the QVF is organized. But that doesn't mean that she overemphasized the level of effort and working expertise that she needs to put into it. I think when we talk about early voting, most township clerks and the county clerk would probably do something like hire a temporary for 6 weeks to get that done, rather than going to the polling place and doing it all themselves. But that that may be a budgetary item for the board. But by and large, I was impressed with the presentation.
The clerk position has not had a raise since 2019.
But then it was a very substantial raise.
But again, it's a different job than it was.
But the statutes haven't changed that much.
But it's still a different job if the clerk was not doing the financials prior and that board agreed with it.
Well, and I didn't ask in terms of, was it that it wasn't getting done or was it delegated to somebody else? Because if it had been delegated to somebody else, it's your choice to take it back. And I think that the clerk, I think it's another position we need to increase the compensation. You had, a big increase at one time. And I think that that's more than deserving to have an increase.
Well, I like to use data, so before you said potentially use CPI-U, I factored using CPI-W. And if we applied those rates from 2019 to 2022, the clerk's salary would be $99,000. Just inflationary.
I'm sorry.
Well, I was
What
gonna-
did you just?
John, but go ahead.
So what I said is, if we take there's been no raise since 2019. So if you take the inflation factor and apply it to that salary for those 5 years, the salary at this point would be $99,000.
And if we apply the same rate we applied to trustees, which would be.
But the difference is when did the increase occur?
Oh, okay.
So this goes back 5 years. Trustees was 2 years, but it was nominal, went from 7,000. And prior to that, it stayed at the same rate since 2012. We had that history.
Mhm.
So if we.
So what was the rate in 2012?
About that. I want to say it was 5,200.
Something around 5,300.
Let's see, 2012 to 18, 5,387.
Okay, so yeah, in December 2012, the clerk's salary was 50,000. Then there were increases, decreases, increases, and so forth. And then in May 2019 or June 2019, she went from 57 to 84.
The position went from 57 to 84.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was a $17,000 increase.
And that was determined by the board of directors at that time so that was like negotiated as opposed to an election type.
Correct. That's when
Nancy had
Clerk
her
Flintoff was
retiring.
appointed.
Yeah.
It's 84,000.
Right.
And it states that since the appointment.
And I think from reading the resolutions that this commission recommended 75,000.
That was a 3-2 decision. I was very much opposed to
Okay,
that.
but it was a decision.
It was a
3 to
vote,
2.
and
That's how we
you
voted.
know, 2 of those people are gone. I voted for that 75. I didn't vote for an increase, in part because there had been a substantial increase before. And, you know, I think that the job has changed. I think that the times have changed. But that was my thought at that time.
I think she brings some real value to the job.
If you look at process changes, the use of BSNA has increased substantially, which is all cost savings to the township by using the systematic methods instead of hand methods of doing the financials.
Just by virtue of the procurement process now being online.
Is that the approval process?
Yes, the approval process is not handing pieces of paper, so that saves labor. And nobody loses, and nobody should be able to lose it, huh?
So I can believe that statement, but what are you thinking how does that influence the discussion we have going now? In terms of the money saved by the
You're
BSA?
right, I'm talking to the person, but if that is given direct savings to the township, which it has.
So before financial transactions were tracked manually,
Purchases, yes.
purchases, and they've
And
adopted
approvals,
the BSNA software system for it.
yes, and they're
Which
trying
was-
to put in fixed assets. So currently fixed assets is on spreadsheets. Getting the budgeting process on BSNA. Previous, it was on spreadsheets. I could look at the different modules, I don't recall, but I've heard the conversations.
I know that BSNA had been used largely by Washington County and several other townships. I know that Washington County replaced BSNA with Tyler Technologies in, I think, 2015.
Okay.
Whether that makes a difference or not, but yeah, going from.
But it's
section-
let's just say it's an enterprise package, which I'm assuming Washington has an enterprise package, which
Yeah.
means that you have one application that does multiple functions. A tax collection, assessing, payroll, accounts payable, general ledger, fixed assets, purchasing.
Well, beyond that, one vendor that covers a number of different departments.
That's what an enterprise package is.
Right.
But they're all integrated as well.
Right.
So instead of having separate software for each of those, they're integrated so that the financial numbers flow through all of the modules. Now, that is my forte.
And I brought them in to work for the Register of Deeds and the Clerk's Final Records Office. And indeed, the financial expenses and income for both of those departments go straight through the treasurer and so forth in administration. So you're right.
So Kathleen, I'm still not sure. Are you saying that the treasurer and clerk compensation be lowered because their job is so much easier now because of BSNA?
I don't think she's saying that.
I didn't think she was, but
No, It should go up because for somebody to manage that, it takes more smarts.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
You just were pointing it out as a,
Yeah.
You know, one
A
of the things I
cost
think is that
savings.
she's progressive,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of it's not being a stagnant position,
Yeah.
you know, and looking for opportunities to, you know, the new and improved, things don't stay the same. And I think that, you know, I think Jessica does a great job. You know, to me, it's just one of those in terms of getting your head around, okay, I've worked with a lot of people that I think did a great job, but what was that position, the value of that position? And, you know, we're looking at comparables and we're looking at the past and what we've done and kind of looking to the future in terms of how this will continue to evolve. So, you know.
Well, I think elections will only get more complicated.
Well, you know, at some point, I think we'll do internet voting. And then you're gonna have a whole nother tough sort of thing in terms of.
On
you know, how-
BSNA.
how-
No.
how you- So, you know, we don't know what it's like the Jetsons, you know? Drones. This is what we got today.
Right.
Well, we're, so far, I'm feeling like we have some agreement on trustees. We're getting close on the treasurer.
I think so.
Okay. The clerk and the supervisor are areas where we'll have more conversation.
I think we're having a conversation right now.
Yeah.
Well, we're not.
So I think ultimately the clerk is gonna be somewhere in the 90s. I'm not saying where, but
Well, I think, you know, when we look at it in terms of 11%, yeah. But when we look at it in terms of comparable to, you know, more populous townships, maybe it's somewhere under.
11% for the clerk, you're suggesting?
11% took us up, I think, at
92.
84 took us up to
92 something,
92 something.
92.
I think 92.4 might have been 10%.
Yeah, 92.
92.8.
Right, but then you're not taking it, you're taking this 10% as the past 2 years of equalization is 10%, whereas the salary has not increased for the past 5 years.
I think it's a place to start.
It is a place to start.
And
That's why I said, I think we're thinking it's in the 90s. I don't know where.
So when you had earlier mentioned, I think 99 based on 5 years
If you just use the CPI factor, bumping it up.
CPAP, okay, all right.
Now, if you took 3 years of CPI and 5% from equalization,
Well, less than that,
someplace lower.
still in the 97, 98,000 range.
Well, if we're
So
following,
which would actually equal what the equalization is. In other words, the increase in taxable value, it's maxed out at 5%, even if the CPI is at 8%. So that actually totally aligns with the equalization.
if we say that we need to include equalization numbers from 2020, 2021, and 2022, that's 1.29 plus 5 plus 5, 11.29%.
No, I think you got more years needed than that.
When was
are people getting 11% raises?
June 19?
Because we've got some people that, you know,
Right.
for that firehouse thing, a lot of people, it seems like they're not very happy with their officials at this point in time.
Actually, why don't you say that to Jim and Kathleen, because I think that's a valid point. That's a really valid point.
Because we're responsible to other people. That's kind of how I view my role here. Is that, you know, I'm thinking of people I know and, you know, I've worked in financial services. We talk about money. We talk about how much people are getting paid. And in terms of, in financial services is an industry where people get paid more. And so, you know, who's getting 11% raises? You know, I kind of question that. And also, I had some people over for dinner last night. And full disclosure, I don't really know these people at all. You know, it's one of those things, cross paths, and, you know, I have these people over for dinner.
And what was for dinner? No,
It was
just kidding.
fantastic,
Sorry.
really, but they live in the township. And so, you know, you start talking about different things, your community interests, and, you know, things come up. And, you know, my husband has a history with the township, and so people ask him about things. And people were not happy. And, you know, I hate hearing that. And I hate the fact that, you know, it doesn't, you know, I think that conflict is good. I think compromise is wonderful. I don't think it's a rule according to Monica. Usually it's, you know, people working together make for a better solution. And it seems to me, I'm not as informed as I think as you are, Kathleen. I don't go to every single meeting, but certainly I review different information from those meetings, is that we have people that have a tough time working together. And it's not one person, it's not you know, it's one of those, always enough blame to go around. But these are the people that we're looking at, or these positions are positions that we're looking at rewarding. And so I go, you know, I'm just sensitive to, and these people didn't know that I was on this commission, you know, it didn't come up and I didn't volunteer it.
Well, when it comes to how the township spends money, I'm one of those that is not happy. In fact, I formed a group about fiscally responsible, and I'm not happy with that, and I tell them often, because they can save money. They could save $200,000 off the bat if you hired a planner instead of outsourced it, but that's not.
Is that a concern with the amount or the process or both?
It's the process of, in the amount, how we spend money.
Okay.
We could do it more.
Process results.
We could do it more wisely. So with all that said, personally, I would not put that on the backs of our staff or elected official. Take these people out of this situation and compensate fairly, you know.
Even though we're looking at some substantial increases to the base salary, it's looking at the data, and for that, it's more of a market adjustment for that particular role. And to be, I mean, competitive with other employers in that people may be leaving Scio Township to work in. People that work in Scio Township are the ones who are going to be running for these positions. And they could go somewhere else, just like when you're in the military. You can go somewhere else and earn a lot more money. I mean, my nephew could earn $150,000 as a drone operator outside of commercial. So we have to think about, and I value people's salaries more than I do other things that the township has invested in. Because I want, and I never got involved in the township that much until 2021. And I value hiring people, attracting candidates who have the skills and experience and education that we need to manage the township well. I would much rather invest in the people than in projects.
And I'm of the same opinion. And if the board worked hard on it, they could find cost savings, which I can find cost savings. Because I look at the bills and the budgets and all that kind of stuff.
I'd like to go back to something you mentioned, Monica. And it was in the context of another conversation, but you said, you know, do you know people that are getting 11% raises? And just addressing that point, when we talked about these people in 11% raises, this isn't for year over year. This is over a period of, well, in this case, like 4 or 5 years, right? So So to answer that question, yes, over that period of time, absolutely. And historically, if people are not just doing their job, but doing their job effectively and adding additional value to whatever position they're in, then yeah, I would expect that or more. Now, I don't know enough about clerks in the clerk business to know, but I think Jim was going for this. The presentation that she made certainly would suggest that she knows what she's doing.
Oh,
right?
I don't question that with any of our officials.
We're not doing a performance.
Yeah. I don't question that with any of our officials.
So in any case, to answer your question about 11%, yeah, maybe not over 1 year, but in a case like this, for this particular position, yes,
Yeah, makes
it
sense.
seems
And same
11%,
thing for the treasurer position.
Yeah, and I actually think the treasurer needs to be
yeah, more.
It needs to be more
higher
than
than
10%.
Well, the treasurer last had an increase in April of 2018. So that takes, right.
But I think, to your point, $75,000 to $85,000 for a senior financial analyst, that's what would be comparable with work, experience, information, knowledge. What you looking for?
Just a cup of water, something. That's not a big deal.
drinking fountain.
Yeah, I'll stay in
Wonder
here.
where it went.
We won't talk about anything important if you run down the hall.
No, that's all right. It's not that. It's too exciting to be in here. I can't miss a minute.
So we're not deciding today, we're in a ballpark.
Yeah,
Right.
we're talking, today's a talking day.
Well, I still think, we're very much in the ballpark, trustees. Okay, we're still talking on the other three.
Well, I think we're in the ballpark. I think we're in the same neighborhood on every position, really. I think there might be some fine tuning, but I think we're moving in the right direction. I think we're like-minded on a lot of things, that we want to value the people that are working for us. We want to attract, we want to continue to attract valuable people.
Yeah, but we really haven't talked about the supervisor position
Yeah,
yet.
that's where we are now. Comments?
I'll jump in. Now, I haven't seen any of the board of trustees meetings with the new hire.
Oh, yeah, that person's only been here for like 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that.
Is she
What's her name?
Joyce Parker.
Joyce?
Parker.
Okay.
So we can refer to that person as
Ms. Parker.
Joyce.
And what is her title? Chief manager?
She's township manager. Yeah.
Okay. So in any case, I haven't caught any board of trustees meetings since Joyce has been here, but I understand that she's pretty well qualified. And my hope is that she would then take a lot of the burden off the supervisor position, which was our intent, or what I remember from 2 years ago is that we were thinking the supervisor position really should be a half-time and not a full-time position. And so my thought is that I would like to continue down that path. 2 years ago, I didn't anticipate it would take 2 years to get, but we went through 3 other managers during that time period. But in any case, I'm throwing that out. Are we still, we're evaluating the part-time?
I want to make sure that this commission understands. The only job description that exists is for the township manager. There is no job description for supervisor, clerk, or treasurer. So we can only look at statutory duties.
Okay.
I have the resolution. I'm looking at it, January 10th, 2023. The board rescinded the supervisor's job description. So what he presents is not the job description. That is something that he made up.
Well,
it annoys me that that individual will continue to say that that is his job description. It is not. The board ruled on that. So we are only looking at statutory duties. if he decides that he wants to go to every planning commission pre-hearing, which he does, that is not a statutory duty. The board did not put that in a job description. So he has embellished his responsibilities, therefore stating that his job is full-time, he put it in his job description. Whereas when his salary was reduced to 40 voluntarily, another resolution, he states in there that his duties have been, are assumed by the township manager. At that time it was David Rowley. So I don't like an individual coming in here and saying, well, these are my duties. I work full time. I spend hours on emails. That is not your statutory duties. That is time management.
Okay, at the same time, Kathleen, I think his perception was he wanted to share what he was doing on a day in and day out basis, which is kind of one of the things we ask him or ask them to do is share what they were doing. So I think you're focused on statutory duties and specific duties assigned by the Board of Trustees. And he's doing what he thought were priorities, for the township. So yeah, definitely two different. And I agree with you because I heard him say full-time position. It's like, well, we didn't think so, but once again, going back to hopefully Joyce now will, make that a little, whoever the supervisor is, in the coming years, hopefully it will continue to be a part-time position and not consume as much time.
Yeah, our job would be a lot easier if the board would come up with job descriptions for those positions.
You're so mean. You let these guys.
I mean, there wouldn't be any question.
I think if you look at what the statutes say about what their, name something that the supervisor has,
Moderates the board.
moderates the board meeting.
Yeah.
But to listen to what does moderate the board meeting do?
Yeah.
What does that, does that entail?
Means you attend the meeting and the same as all the other board members, but you get to decide who gets to talk and how long I get to talk.
But that's, I don't know when these statutes were written, but it seems just by reading them when I had the red book,
Yeah.
that, it doesn't say a whole lot. So to listen to but there are things like, I know the supervisor put down in that description that he gave, I won't say the job description. The description was HR and being a mediator in the township. That perhaps is what he has a background in that he likes to do, but it's not, like you said, anything to do with what the statute says this position is.
The HR is the township manager.
Yeah, that's the township manager.
With an open position.
I also look at, in terms of, how he spends his time or things that he likes to get involved with. And I think it's kind of like the trustees. All they have to do is show up at the meetings.
Mm-hmm.
They can get involved with these various things, but they're electing to do that to, expand their involvement. And I think that's a lot like with the supervisor position and with the trustees as well as with the supervisor. Someone on their personal interests and how they execute. And I think that to your point in terms of hoping, you're thinking it's going to become more part-time because we believe we have a solid manager today. And at the same time, as we grow and we're looking at, our township is getting bigger and our government's going to be bigger. And we acknowledge that we're hoping, or it seems like we're hoping from this conversation, that more staff is going to be added. And as you're adding more staff, that supervisor position is going to be taking on more responsibilities too. I think of the CEO I think of the manager somewhat, or the township supervisor somewhat as a CEO. You're gonna laugh at this, but there's been times with companies I've been kind of fired up about them when we send off a letter. I'm sending it to the CEO. I'm not sending it to the second guy. I'm sending it to the CEO. So in terms of people have a problem, maybe they know somebody else and they reach out to, somebody else that they know. But I would guess that more people in the township do not have a personal relationship with our township officials than those that do. And I can tell you, I don't have a personal relationship with anyone. I met them, hello, how are you? But, I go to, when I write a letter, I got a complaint, I go to the head guy.
Well, at the same time, the head guy quite often has somebody else reading or checking their emails. It's not, he doesn't get all the emails I get from, various, Home Depot and Staples and whatever else. So, different portion of this topic on the statutory duties, develops township budget. I don't do budgeting well. Is that something that he's, or that position has been routinely doing?
Well, this is where you do need to understand the statute. So in the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act, there is reference to a chief administrative officer who presents the budget to the state.
Okay.
That position, if you do not have a manager, that is the supervisor. When you have a manager, that goes to the manager, and it's clearly stated in that act. And it's listed in Joyce Parker's job description.
Okay, all right.
So
The compensation for the supervisor as of February 22 was $40,000 under the assumption and agreement that this was half-time. Okay. And while we have a manager, I don't think he's full-time. He's still half-time, and he's got a lot more hands on board than he has.
Can you repeat your sentence? I'm not clear on what you said.
His current salary of $40,000 is based on a half-time and also his agreement with the board.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I don't know, with the new manager, I don't think he's going to be taking on additional financial duties and other things. Now, he may still be the point of contact for, an interested developer or a concerned citizen and so forth. And but that's not explicit in the statutory.
the legal agent, so if
Right.
anything's filed against the township, that's the primary name.
Right.
The same if the township takes action
He signs the contracts too.
and consent with the clerk.
Right. Clerk acknowledges it or officiates. But yes,
Yeah, and the township manager has contract management. But, let's talk about the chief complaint officer. Would that be? I understand that. In our prior discussions, there was discussion that it was part-time and with some feedback from Spalding Clark. Was it a 2-day-a-week position, and there was some agreement that if it was $100,000, then therefore the salary would be 40. I don't personally see how it's a 2-day. I think it's clearly at least 4 hours per day. Which is more than
16 versus 20.
Yeah, I don't see how I don't see how a supervisor can take a day off, so to say.
You can't do it well if you're only doing it.
Yeah.
Mondays and Tuesdays.
Yeah,
Can't do that.
No.
so I think it's it requires to keep up with chief complaint officer. It's something that happens daily.
And also too, with our idea of, we have an election coming up, and we acknowledge that we want good people around. The world is a different place, and people aren't as nice as they used to be. And when you're a public official, You take a lot of heat.
Thick skin, you know?
Let me tell
Yeah.
you, I know from experience, being married to somebody who held office, his skin was a lot thicker than mine in terms of people, you know, how those reactions went. So you do have to have some thick skin.
So if we're saying instead of 2 days, maybe 2.5, that's a 25% change in his time.
No, well,
I was just suggesting that instead of saying it was 2 days a week, it's more like 4 hours per day, which is halftime.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
At least halftime.
50%.
2 days would be,
So it's an
16 hours,
increase of
yeah.
what, 20%?
yeah, 25%. So it's 20.
now wait a second. I don't understand. 2 days per week was a description from Spalding Clark, right?
Right,
All right, so, but what we're talking about here is halftime, so,
right. I just think we should say part-time is halftime,
okay. I see what you're saying.
unless,
We should refer to it as a halftime position as opposed to a part-time position.
unless the board tells us differently.
Okay. All right, I didn't realize that was the point you were making, so.
So in January of 22, the position was $72,000 a year. Then in February of 22, it became $40,000 a year.
Yeah, would you like the history on that?
Well,
think she
I
does
kind of
it.
know that,
Read
but
the
that's
paper.
not 72,000 divided by 2. Would be
No, it was
36.
originally, it was 36.
Okay,
It was 36.
okay,
Increased by
And then
11%.
they were looking to hire a manager, so
okay.
that position was doing both jobs.
So trying to move along a little bit here, so I could see increasing that halftime position by, 10, 12% also, along the lines of the, CPI or valuation discussion we've had before.
So this was said in February 22, so we could increment it by a 10% or 11% over those 2 years to be consistent with trustees and others across the board.
Yeah, I think that's what I just said.
Mhm.
Okay,
I think that's what you said.
so that adds $4,400.
$44,000, right?
Yeah, $4,400 to $40,000, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and again, I took the, applying the CPI factor from when that was established. And it came up to 45,835. Not your 5%, just. And that was from 36, 40.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Where are we at with that now? Is it 45?
As long as we do everything the same.
Well,
Similar,
That's,
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
no,
except for the treasurer.
I'm arguing against doing everything the same. Because you were talking about strictly CPI, not the valuation. I'm sorry, CPI, not the tax differences. Remember the CPI last 2 years is higher than our 5%. And I still like that.
But I applied the first value, well, if applying the CPI was at 36,000. And then 36, and then jumping up to the 40 to apply the.
Next one.
Right.
So what did you apply it to 40? Did you 5% or the CPI?
No, the CPI.
Oh, okay, all right, so then we're kind of in agreement on that, right? I was-
So basically, that position was the only one that this compensation commission increased, right?
So you're
From
taking,
36 to 40?
Well, yes, and he also agreed to that in
Yeah,
resolution.
so what are we incrementing the 40,000 by? Is that the 14%?
No, I'm just saying that I got a little bit higher on that just by CPI. If you want to be consistent and go the 11%, that would probably be a fair thing to do.
Okay, are we okay with 11%?
Yeah,
I
that's,
think we can ruminate it
Yes.
until our next meeting.
Okay.
but it's a
We're not
good-
making a vote today. We're putting ourselves in a position to vote next week.
yeah, and the 11%, I think is I thought that was where you came up with a 44.4.
Yeah, yes.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay.
I think we're kind of making some progress here, at least putting some bounds on what we might all be able to comfortably agree to.
And then on going back to the clerk, who hasn't seen an increase since June of 2019, we'll take the 2020 equalization rate, 1.9%, and add that to the 5% and 5% for 2021 and 22, and come up with 11.29. Or should we add that extra
But
budget?
when you have to compound this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I do.
Okay,
You have to compound it. We should do that across the board.
okay, let's look at the compounded rates.
Mhm.
All right.
Progress.
It gets more complicated because every year has a different rate to compound by. Yeah, right.
Well, we're figuring it out.
And I'm hosting a dinner party.
I think we kind of hit the wall here.
We're supposed to be at the
Hold
school
on,
club
John's
next
got
meeting,
something
so-
to.
No,
Well, yeah, I think we
had
had maybe
public
some-
comment, right?
Right.
But I think we need to approve the minutes. Or
We're
did
gonna
we?
do that next time.
We
We're
don't
gonna do
have the
that next
minutes.
I do. I
Some
count.
people didn't have the minutes, so we
Okay.
were going to approve them next week.
All right. All right, I'm gonna move that we adjourn for the day.
Support.
Oh,
All in favor?
Can I ask you
Aye.
a question?
Hold on.
Sure.
We're still in, nobody voted.
I wanted to give you my weekly reminder that you have
July
a
17th.
drop dead date of July 17th. And would you like me to update the resolutions and send them to the chair with the numbers blank, but with the dates, assuming that you can adopt them for next week? And then you can circulate them as you decide.
Yeah, because we want to have a meeting next Friday at 2:00, or if,
2:00, 1:00, 2:00?
either way.
does it matter?
I could do either way.
Anybody have a
And I'll
preference?
remind you, I'm out of town, so I
Right,
can
you're
either,
sending to,
I can either join you by Zoom or I can send someone, whichever you prefer.
whatever works for you. I think whatever.
We'll do one or the other. I'll
Okay.
check with Mariah
Friday,
and see
1
what
or 2.
works best.
What time?
Either time is good for me.
1 o'clock would be preferred,
One.
but.
1:00.
Can we do that?
I'm not gonna be here, but Chris Bailey will
Okay,
get
great.
you guys going, get through public comment.
Yeah.
And then.
Taking an early vacation, I understand.
Well, with holidays coming up, I'm hoping we can.
Attorney Fink, would you please give them a primer on Open Meetings Act and the minutes, please?
That was my fault.
It's supposed to be, they're supposed to be approved at this meeting,
Yeah.
and I have no problem doing that.
I was fine with that. I read them online.
Okay.
Christie had sent me.
read them online too. Say it looks great.
I move that we approve the meetings.
Minutes.
Minutes from 16th of June.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Who was that Mr.'s voice? Sounded remotely familiar, but
So we're gonna have our next meeting is next Friday,
1 o'clock.
at 1 o'clock.
Yeah. Here.
So let's adjourn again. Anybody, I know we did it, but we sort of redid it. I'd like to move that we adjourn today.
so moved.
Second,
Support.
all in favor?
Aye.
You know, if we pass the resolutions and get them signed next Friday, should we celebrate?